Chivalis will also be the moderator for tonight's debate. I would also like to mention that No Boundaries Radio is doing a live radio and video streaming of the debate, and podcasts will be available later at their website. Taking the affirmative position on tonight's question is Dr. Gannon Murphy. Dr. Murphy is author of 3 books, including Reasons for the Christian Hope, published by Mentor Books in 2009, and is general editor of American Theological Inquiry, a biannual journal of theology, culture, and history. He holds an MA in theology from Bethel Theological Seminary and a PhD in philosophical theology. Is there another kind? From the University of Wales at Mediator. Taking the negative position is August Berkshire. August has been an atheist activist since 1984. He is the president of Minnesota Atheists, a past vice president of Atheist Alliance International, and on the Speakers Bureau for the Secular Student Alliance. He has served on the boards of directors of several local and national atheist and humanist organizations. He has written a number of pamphlets, all of which are available on the table by the main entrance in the room. His website is augustberkshire.com. He is the owner of the Atheist license plate for the state of Minnesota, and least anybody question, he is also proud to be listed in the reference book, Who's Who in Hell. For the second half of tonight's program, members of the audience will be able to ask questions of the debaters. I will explain how that will be done later. And with that, I'd like to turn this over to Dr. Chivalis for his explaining the rules for tonight's debate.
Well, good evening. It's a pleasure to be up here, and I'm really happy with the size crowd we have. Unlike the debate that we had 2 years ago, it will be a little less formal in terms of this. I'm going to make this, we're going to have pretty much of an academic debate. August Berkshire will go first. Both speakers will have approximately 30 minutes. They can divide it up in the way they would like. And so they'll start off with at least a 20-minute talk, perhaps 25 minutes. Then Gannon Murphy will come up and speak for either 20 or 25 minutes, depending on how they would like to go. And then their rejoinders will be the remainder of time. So if they've spoken for 25, they'll have five more minutes. Either way, both speakers will have 30 minutes total. We should be done an hour from when we start here in a moment or two. And at that point, Hank Zumach will then take over and discuss the format for the question and answer session. So without further ado, August will begin as soon as you're ready.
Thank you. Stopwatch.
I never done.
Jump the gun real quick. Get a couple minutes in here. This is a free debate, and I guarantee you'll get your money's worth. Okay. Well, thanks for coming here tonight. I'd like to thank the co-sponsors of this debate, the Crosse Area Freethought Society, the Secular Student Society, and the Christian Faculty Staff Group. I'd especially like to thank Hank Zumach for his persistence in setting up and publicizing this debate. Thanks also to my friend and debate opponent, Gannon Murphy, and to Mark Chivalis for moderating this debate. Do gods exist? I submit that before we can answer that question, we have to get more information. We have to know what a god is. We have to know how we can verify the existence of one. And we have to know how we could falsify the existence of one. Until then, the best we can do is say that it makes sense to lack a belief in gods due to a lack of evidence and a lack of compelling reasons to believe in them. In other words, it makes sense to be an atheist. In 1787, Thomas Jefferson wrote, question with boldness even the existence of a God, because if there be one, he must more approve of the homage of reason than that of blindfolded fear. 33 years later, Jefferson's bold questioning led to the following conclusion. To talk of immaterial existences is to talk of nothings. To say the human soul, angels, God are immaterial is to say they are nothings, or that there is no God, no angel, no soul. I cannot reason otherwise. Or, as the modern philosopher Dallas B. McCone put it, the invisible and the non-existent look very much alike. Atheists lack a belief in gods because we see no evidence or compelling reason to believe in them. However, we are open to changing our minds if you can provide us with evidence or compelling reason to do so. On the other hand, if you believe in a God, ask yourself if there's anything, at least in theory, that would get you to change your mind, such as a natural explanation for everything that you now attribute to the supernatural. If there's nothing that could possibly change your mind, then by definition, you're closed-minded. Now, most people assume they know what a God is, their God. But an atheist has no idea what a God is. So I've come up with 6 main questions and many sub-questions about the nature of gods. First, what are gods composed of? What is spirit? We know what spirit isn't, but we don't know what it is. The second question I have about gods is, what are the attributes of gods? Stories of various gods list differing characteristics. For example, do gods exist eternally? Or can gods get born and die? In fact, one part of the Christian God seems to be eternal, and another part is born, dies, and resurrects. Are gods present everywhere in the universe, or are they confined to certain areas like oceans, volcanoes, and forests? How big or small are gods? What about power? Are gods all powerful, or are there certain things they can't do? What about knowledge? Are gods all knowing, or are there some things that they don't know? Can a god know the future? What about the attitudes of gods toward humans? Are they all loving, or evil, or temperamental, or indifferent? Are gods visible, invisible, or do they go back and forth? And if they're visible at any time, what do they look like? The third main question I have about gods is, how do gods do things? What mechanisms do gods use to accomplish things? So, if you believe a god creates something from nothing, how does a god do it? What mechanism does it use to, say, create the universe from nothing? Or if you believe a god tinkers with our DNA, how? Magic invisible fingers? How does a god implant a moral sense in our brains, if you believe that's something that he does? Miracles and magic are not useful answers. My fourth question is, how many gods are there? Fifth, where are these gods located? And sixth, what difference does it make? If the God that most people believe exists were to suddenly disappear, what would change in the natural world? Wouldn't the sun keep shining, the rain keep falling, and the flowers keep blossoming? When Noam Chomsky was asked whether or not he was an atheist, he responded, "I don't even know what it is I'm not supposed to believe in." Now, I expect Gannon will offer us some sort of definition of a God and tell us some of this God's attributes. Ask yourself, how does he know this is true? And isn't he just making up a definition and description of a God to suit his purposes without any evidence that such a God actually exists? So we had many questions about the nature of gods. Now let's turn to 7 problems that come up when we talk about certain kinds of gods, the kinds of gods that most people believe in. The first problem is the problem of scale. If humans are the ultimate creation of the universe, then why did this God create 100 billion galaxies when only one star and one planet were needed? And why did 12 billion years pass before humans showed up? The second problem is the problem of silence. If a God exists who wants us to be aware of his existence, why doesn't he clearly reveal himself? And if the punishment for not believing is eternal hellfire, then it's cruel for this God not to convincingly reveal himself. The gods of the Old and New Testament supposedly performed miraculous events so that people would believe. So if you believe these stories are true, then at least the biblical gods had no philosophical problem revealing themselves in convincing ways. So what's changed since then? The rise of science and critical thinking. The third problem is the problem of revelation. If a God exists who wants us to understand him, why do we have so many different and competing revelations, religions, and holy books? How can we tell the difference between a revelation and a hallucination? The fourth problem is the problem of evil. And I think Gannon will acknowledge that this is one of the most difficult hurdles that theists have to surmount. If a God exists who's all-powerful and all-loving, then why did natural evils exist, such as natural disasters, diseases, birth defects, and predators? The best excuse that theists can come up with is that their God has some mysterious, unknown greater good that he's trying to accomplish. But as often happens with religious apologetics, this answer is without substance, because we're never told what this greater good is. Furthermore, it begs the question, doesn't this limit their God's knowledge and power? Doesn't this say that their invisible God can't think of or implement a better way to accomplish his mysterious goals other than by torturing people? Frankly, hospitals are monuments to God's incompetence, indifference, cruelty, or non-existence. Now, up until this point, I focused on the problem of natural evil. I don't blame a God for the evil that humans do, since arguably human free will is an identifiable greater good. Nevertheless, if you believe in the biblical God, it begs the question as to why he rescued the Jews from Pharaoh, but did not rescue the Jews from Hitler. We might also ask, if a God created a heaven where the souls in heaven have free will, but where there is no evil, then why couldn't God do the same for life on earth? The fifth problem is the problem of unintelligent design. If an all-powerful, all-wise God designed humans and other life forms, why didn't he do a better job? There are many examples I could cite, but I'll just list a few. Why do our breathing and swallowing passages intersect so that we can choke to death on food? Why do ostriches have short, stubby wings when arms would have been much better? Why do whales have hip bones that don't connect to hind legs, and in fact don't even connect to their spines? Why have 99% of all species that have ever existed gone extinct? The sixth problem is the problem of free will. If a God exists who knows the future, that means humans have no free will. And yet it's often claimed this God will judge, reward, and punish us based on free will decisions. The seventh problem, and I've never heard anyone articulate this, but I think it's a pretty devastating one, is the problem of the size of God. If a God is the size of the universe, as most people claim, then God's consciousness, traveling at the speed of light, would take 93 billion years to travel edge to edge. How does God keep in touch with himself? Whenever we have a discussion about gods, it's always good to be on the lookout for God of the gaps arguments. When people don't know or don't like something about nature, they sometimes employ a God to try and change things. The gap that God fills can be physical or emotional. However, we're never told what a God is or exactly how a God does anything. Thus, God is not a useful answer because it provides us with no information. We always have to rely on science to provide us with the real answers.